Number two, what we're really talking about is embarrassment. And when you present this fact of if you're not going to ask a question because you're embarrassed, how can you go perform? Right? Maybe you're embarrassed. And I know I was at first. I'm like, well, nobody else is asking questions, so they must be understanding. Well, then you get to the practice field and you realize, oh, no, there were about 3 guys who understood in that meeting of 20 people, but nobody else wanted to ask a question either. It's not worth it, right? It's not worth it to be afraid of embarrassment to not get better. That's not a reason. That's an excuse.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to this next exclusive interview with one athletic titan that I've gotten to know over the years, and I'm so excited to introduce him here in a minute. But let me tell you a little bit about the man, the myth, the legend that I call Ryan Harris. Ryan is a Super Bowl champion. He is a 10-year NFL veteran. He is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, and now is a speaker, author, and just amazing businessman. In 2015, Ryan became a Super Bowl champion after winning Super Bowl 50 with the Denver Broncos, and has also played in his career for the Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, and Pittsburgh Steelers before retiring a few years ago in 2016. To give you some context of what he's doing now, kind of after sports, and how he's transitioned, everything from real estate investing, startups, and nonprofits, he has an aim to make a massive impact in the business world, in athletics, in Denver, Colorado, where we both reside, and well beyond. Just got back from a speech in Phoenix, Arizona, actually a little bit ago. Ryan was named the first African-American to be awarded the Colorado Sportscaster of the Year in 2020, and was also named by the Denver Business Journal to the 40 under 40 class of 2021. You'll catch Ryan doing an analyst for Notre Dame football now, the Denver Broncos preseason games, CBS Sports, Notre Dame Radio, Westwood One Radio, NFL broadcasts, and much, much more. So, my friend Ryan Harris, welcome to the interview. Thanks for taking your time.
I owe you $20 for that intro. Thank you, brother, and great to be here with you. And I just want to start by saying, Matt, I'm so happy for you, your success, how much impact you're making. It inspires the rest of us to do more. So thanks for all you're doing, man.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. And, you know, it's being surrounded by people like you that keeps me inspired and fired up and excited, because it's, you know, that old saying, right? You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And seeing what you're doing and the impact you're making and others in my life too, it's like that. It's this fuel, this mission just to make people better and make people grow and develop and just dream and go actually make it happen.
I mean, it's going to happen either way, right? They're going to grow and develop one way or another. It can grow and develop negatively or positively. And I'm honored to be with you to share this time and hopefully guide people to some positive change.
Yes. So let's dive into your athletic background for a little bit. You went to Notre Dame. You made it to the NFL. Was that always a dream of yours to play collegiately, to play in the NFL? Take me like way back. When did that dream, I don't know, formulate in your head? And then when did you think like, holy moly, this is actually possible?
Well, the first time, I mean, for me, I didn't start playing football till I was 14. And I did know that I loved the game. My parents weren't going to let me play it. Something I'm so grateful for, something that I'm pushing to change here in Colorado for non-contact football under 14. But I still remember my first practice. And in the first practice, before, you got some ones where you don't have pads. And when we got our pads, I was so excited. I was like, oh, my God, yes, like I get my pads. And then one of my friends was like, hey, let's go heads up. And I was like, no, I'm good. He's like, why not? I'm like, man, don't tell anybody, but I don't know how to hit. He dies laughing. He tells everybody. The coaches are laughing. Well, the next day, our first padded practice, a cornerback got an interception. He started running down the sidelines. I closed my eyes and turned out I knew how to hit. So that was the beginning when after that first practice with pads, my coach said, Ryan, if you keep this up, you could be really special. So for me, it was just like, hey, I just want to maximize my greatness at football. Nothing else was on the horizon. And then I still remember back in the day when we were young, Matt, I got my first offer my junior year and I was like, hold on. And I literally said to my parents, football can pay for college. Like I knew people got scholarships and even people on my team, but for me, it wasn't a reality. I was in JROTC. I was going to go to the ROTC program at the University of Minnesota and get a job after college. And then the NFL, once I got to Notre Dame, the NFL, my junior year, Coach Weiss pulled me in and said, hey, I know you're thinking about going to the draft, but here's why I think you should stay. And I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, did he just say draft like NFL? Like, whoa, he thinks I'm thinking about leaving? So, he's like, I want your answer by the end of tomorrow. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can give it now. But I was like, okay, Coach, well, I'll let you know tomorrow. But that was the first time that my junior year in college, that I really saw the NFL on the horizon.
So this is really interesting for me because I think it feels like there's a lot of pressure now about, it's like, what's your plan to get to the collegiate level? Like when I'm in high school, it's like, what's your plan to get to the collegiate level? What's your plan to get to the whatever professional sports, organization it is, right? NFL, MLB, like whatever. And it feels like there's a lot of pressure. Like you had to have this plan. Do you see that in athletes today? Like, do you sense this pressure, or is it dependent on the coach, dependent on the player?
I do see a lot of pressure on athletes now, and it's more younger to get into one sport, which I think is completely ridiculous. Every single player I played with in the NFL played multiple sports. And for me, I was tremendously lucky, right? I didn't know that my high school was a profile school, meaning that schools only look at, okay, where can I go to visit a program that I know is going to produce a quality result? So I was lucky enough to be in a high school like that. And at the same time, if I was just trying to get to college for free and get to the NFL, man, I would have missed out on all the extra work it took to actually do that. I mean, I was doing hot yoga at 14. People were laughing at me. Teammates were laughing at me. I ran 18 400s, 3 times a week each summer for 2.5 weeks. And those aren't the things you do if you're trying to plan to get there, right? If I was like, well, wait a second, I don't know if a coach is going to be watching my running. I don't know if this is going to pay off. You don't get to know those things. So for me, it has to be player driven, because you and I have seen it. We have seen in the field of play when someone's parents wanted them to be there and they don't really like it. And that's a long day for that person. So There's tremendous amount of pressure on athletes. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on all performers, right? It could be theater, it could be music, it could be business. And at the end of the day, the ones who succeed are the ones who choose that is their life passion, or whose life passion chose them. And in that way, football really chose me first. I could be big. I mean, I was a chubby kid with glasses. My cheeks came underneath, And football, I had a place, though, in football, right? I didn't have a place in basketball. I didn't have a place, in swimming, so to speak. But I played football, baseball, and I wrestled. And those things made me a better athlete and made me a better person, especially wrestling, to be able to handle the individual yet team aspect that I would encounter for my professional career.
The love, the passion for the game allowed you to do the work necessary to then experience and get the opportunity.
100%.
Where does your drive come from? Because, what you talk about, certain themes when I do these interviews, right, that I start hearing and putting together the pieces, right? And one of them that I hear you just touched on is internal competitiveness. Right? It's that internal drive, and it's all driven by, I have a passion for the game.
Right.
And then it makes the work easier, right? Not easy. I'd say
more
easier,
fun,
but
it's
more fun, right?
Yes.
And I think some athletes have that, some athletes don't. But like for you personally, where does that drive come from? Does it come from a certain place, or is it truly like, I love this, so I'm willing to pick out and do the extra work to maximize my ability?
I've always wanted to be great at what I do. I want to be a great father. I want to be a great husband. And if you're going to do something, I want to be the best. And I can fall short, right? I can fall short, but I'm willing to fall short because I want to be great. And the biggest difference I can illustrate, that passion and that want to be great. And to me, having a passion means you expect nothing of the sport. I didn't expect anything from football. I didn't expect a college scholarship. I didn't expect a Super Bowl. I didn't expect playoff games. I wanted to be great. And when somebody's expecting something from the game, well, now you're going to expect something in the game to happen. You're going to expect the player to either give you something or make a mistake. And those of us who have a passion and a love, if we fail, we're curious. Okay, I failed. What do I do to make sure I can improve? Where somebody who's expecting something from the game, they say, well, wait a second, I can't, I failed, but it's the game's fault, or it's this fault, or it's you're done. You're not building your greatness. And unfortunately, a lot of players, I'd say 30% of every college team has players that never want to play the game of football again. And it's because they got away from their parents and they don't want to play, and they really don't have to now. And most universities have 4-year commitments at scholarships, so they don't have to necessarily play. And it's because they're done. They don't want to do it. And because you have a limit to your willingness, you will not see the areas you can grow. When we won Super Bowl 50, my 9th year in the NFL, I had to relearn how to breathe because Peyton Manning ran so many plays. Instead of running from that, I went to my friend who trains UFC fighters, and he taught me to breathe in for 5, swallow your breath, out for 8. I was willing to do that because I love the sport and I love the opportunity to be great. And if you lack that desire to be great, you will always lose to somebody who's willing to be curious in failure and to do the work to be better.
I love that word, curious. It's constantly learning. I mean, you and I, we've had many conversations just about business and life and all those sorts of things. And I think why I enjoy our conversation so much is because we're both asking questions like back and forth to each other, right? Just learning and taking it in. And that curiosity is missing, right? Do you see, because really what you're talking about is first of all, if I don't have a passion, that's going to be pretty painful along the way. But if I don't have curiosity, then I'm ultimately passing judgment on someone else or myself. Would you say that's true?
And you're missing an opportunity, right? Curiosity creates opportunity. And if you're not curious, then you're going to miss an opportunity to connect, to improve. And this is in life too, right? Like if somebody tells me they're racist, I'm like, really? So you have any kids? Yeah, I have kids. Okay. Well, if your child needed a life-saving surgery, would you care if that person was black or yellow or brown? Well, no, that's an emergency. Okay, well, so what you're saying is when you're comfortable, you have preferences, right? So I mean, this is something where you can follow your curiosity in any conversation on any topic. It's going to create connection, and it's going to build a bridge. It's going to lead you to new opportunities. The lack of curiosity is palpable for people around you, right? We know when someone's not curious. We know when someone arrived somewhere to try and get something out of an event. And it may be something where it's a school or it's a training program. They want a job. They want to know the answers. Well, you don't get to play in the NFL knowing you're going to win the game, right? How about if guys just came, Coach, we're not going to leave the tunnel tonight because we're not sure we're going to win this game. We're not sure it's going to pay off. Like, you don't get to do that. You get to be curious, and where does that curiosity take you? And for me, that took me to find meditation, to circle around positivity, to grow, and to be willing to make a mistake. And that curiosity is the greatest key to your future that you can have if you're an athlete or otherwise.
Say I'm a high school, collegiate, even pro athlete, right? Doesn't matter the level. Sometimes we get in trouble where we know we should ask something, like be curious, ask a question, ask for help, but we hesitate. And there's lots of reasons for that. It could be lack of confidence. It could be, back in the day, Ryan, I would hold myself back from asking because I didn't want to feel stupid. I didn't want the coach to think I didn't know what the heck I was doing, right? Because it was going to take playing time away from me, things like that. You have a different mindset, but what advice would you give to an athlete at any level, boys sports, girls sports, doesn't matter, where they know they need to be curious, but they're fearful of something, right? Being made fun of, laughed at, coach thinking something different. Like, what advice would you give them to ask the question anyway, to be curious, to go seek that help?
Number one, know that I've been there too. And it was about 5 years into my 10-year career where I just started asking questions. Number two, what we're really talking about is embarrassment. And when you present this fact of, if you're not going to ask a question because you're embarrassed, how can you go perform? Right? Maybe you're embarrassed. And I know I was at first. I'm like, well, nobody else is asking questions, so they must be understanding. Well, then you get to the practice field and you realize, oh, no, there are about 3 guys who understood in that meeting of 20 people. but
Yes.
nobody else wanted to ask a question either. It's not worth it, right? It's not worth it to be afraid of embarrassment to not get better. That's not a reason. That's an excuse. And the third thing I would say is the only way we show our intelligence is through our questions, right? If we're talking about financial literacy and somebody says, hey, well, what do I do with $10? Okay, that's a question. If we're talking about financial literacy and somebody says, what's the best way to create income from real estate? Well, whoa, now we're talking about a different level. Now I know you're in a thought process about revenue producing income. And we talk about duplexes. So the only way to show your coaches that you are intelligent is through your questions. And, when I was with Peyton Manning, one of the greatest lessons I learned from him was to ask questions. And the first couple of weeks I'm with Peyton Manning, he's in a meeting. He'll ask 10 questions in a 30-minute meeting. And it took me about 2 weeks to realize he knew the answers to all of them, but he wanted the coaches to know the answers and the players, right? So what he would do is if I was Peyton, he'd be like, hey, coach, if it's third down and we got cover 2, I'm throwing it to Matt here, right? And he's running an in route. Well, whatever you were doing, Matt, now you're in the conversation because of the question that the leader just asked. That's leadership. Asking questions is leadership. Asking questions is demonstrating your knowledge to your peers. So number 1, I've been there. Number 2, embarrassment's an excuse, not a reason. And number 3, show your intelligence.
I love that. It's studying the game, right? It's, to your point, even if you know the question, I ask questions all the time, and sometimes I know the answer. Sometimes the answer I get gives me that little shift that I'm like, whoa, I didn't think about it that way. I didn't see it that way. Or sometimes it's like unbelievably powerful, right? Where it's like a complete paradigm shift or something like that. And I'm like, whoa, based on that curiosity. And I think that's such a key element for these like student athletes to understand, and also coaches to understand like the power of questions that you ask your athletes, right? To engage them and get them talking and create an environment where it's open to those types of questions.
Yeah, it's incumbently important on coaches to create a teaching environment that gives space for failure and technical instruction to succeed, right? That's what you have to do. And when you're asking a question, if you're an athlete, use a how or what question, a word to start your question. Why questions have a negative connotation, right? Why do you have that book behind you, Matt? Versus like, what made you put keep going behind you, right? And all of a sudden now you're starting to smile. And my favorite story from the NFL, one of my favorite coaches, and it also pays to know if this person's a data person or a relationship person who you're talking to. We had a particular play, pass 18 man, which basically said everybody's running to the right, faking the run. And I'm on an island with 10 yards of space on either side of me with the best athlete on the defensive line. We ran the play twice. A quarterback almost got killed twice, from other people. And we're walking through it, and I turn over my shoulder in my stance to our coach, and I say, hey, coach, what's our success ratio on this play? Right? He's a data guy. He's an engineer. He starts hemming and hawing. He's like, I'll tell you it's 0. Just turned back around. We ran the play. We didn't run the play the rest of the year. Right? So
That's great.
There's a way to go about communicating. And the most important thing in athletics, in life, is communication. Right? Can I communicate effectively? And one of the people I look up to, they talked about how you cannot communicate your way, especially for coaches, right? You cannot just say, this is my way. The only way to have effective communication is to understand where the other person is. So if you're a data person, I'm telling you, hey, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great thing for your business. You've already checked me out because you don't have any numbers. Versus if I say, hey, did you know that with diversity, equity, and inclusion, the Boston Consulting Group proved that you have a 19% increase in revenue? Well, now if you're a data person, you're like, whoa, hold on. You can increase my revenue 19%? So
Yes.
This is a way to speak to people. How and what questions, know if someone's a data person or not. And a really good book in this regard is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He also, I think, has a master class. But to understand who you're speaking to and where they're coming from is the key foundation of communication.
It's so good because I love the how and what questions too, because if you would have turned in your stance and looked at the coach, been like, why do you keep calling this play? He's going to ramp up emotionally and be like, do your job. Like there's a Bill Belichick, quote, just like, be quiet, like go back to work, do your thing, instead of looking at some of the data and facts and things like that. Or you have a relationship guy as a coach. You're like, Coach, Peyton almost got killed.
Yeah. How many more times do you want to risk that?
How many more times are you going to risk? And
do you want to go ask him if it's his favorite play? Because I don't. Do you want to go ask him? Exactly. So there's ways to communicate, right? There are ways to communicate that you have to understand. It's not enough to know your skill as an athlete, as your skill as a salesperson. You have to go beyond to be great. And a lot of that is in communication.
Yes. So two questions, one athlete, one coach. Who's one of the best teammates you've had, and what made that person such a good teammate?
I've been fortunate to have some great teammates. I mean, the best part of winning Super Bowl 50 was being a part of that team. Mm-hmm. Those players that we challenged each other and supported each other. But my first favorite teammate was Chris Cooper. He's now a offensive line coach at the Minnesota Vikings. And he was a year ahead of me, but he would always, in the NFL environment, it's a very intense, very kind of alpha male, and wannabe alpha male situations. And so he would often tell me like, hey, don't listen to that. Or, hey, he kind of helped me when people's idea of a motivation wasn't effective for me, right? I'm not somebody who, if you want to come and yell and scream at me, especially if there's no technical improvement coaching going on, we have a problem now. And what's fun is in the NFL, we can match you. I can match you, right? You can't do that in college. The coach controls your whole life and your ego. So, but when you're a player, it's very hard to learn the little things. Like one little thing, Chris Cooper helped me. I'm like, man, I'm late off the ball all the time. He's like, yeah, you have to anticipate the snap count. Because in college, snap count is wide 80, set hut, and then you go. But in the pros, it's wide 80, set hut. And you're like, whoa. You snapped the ball before they said set hut. It's like, yeah, you got to anticipate the snap count. Well, nobody told me that, and I didn't understand what it meant when I heard it. So Chris Cooper was great in that regard. Ryan Clady, a great teammate, and all these guys now are best friends of mine. Lou Vasquez, Malik Jackson. Malik Jackson's one of my favorites. He was a defensive tackle. And even though we didn't go against each other, we constantly talked trash to each other, in a way that, hey, do you think that was good? Did you think that was good? Wow, man. Wow, guys, he thought that was good, Or, somebody's going against him. Oh, he kicked your ass. He said, shut up, Ryan Harris. You shut up, or I'll come over there at defensive end. Oh, you wouldn't do that if you dared. All these. It just keeps it fun. And yes. And of course, I've had great leaders like Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger. But the great teammates, they have informal discussions with you that help you understand your area of expertise that you've entered, your capabilities, and they encourage you. Great teammates and great coaches encourage you. And part of that as a player is saying, look, expectations are a form of belief. If my coach is expecting me to do that, he also believes I can do that. He or she also believes I can do that. And for me, a big challenge early in the NFL was taking things personal. I took everything so personal, when really it was encouragement that my coaches were giving me, and they wanted to see how I responded. And fortunately enough for me, I had some great ability to respond and some great performances that showed them my capabilities.
But it sounds like that perspective shift of like, how do I take this feedback? And I can either see it as something personal, like they don't care, they don't like me, they don't believe I can be here, to shifting it to like, they wouldn't be talking to me, whether I like the comment or not, or I like the tone or not, if they actually didn't care. And I can learn from this and maybe ask a follow-up question if I need to, but it's that perspective shift of like, oh, they're saying that because they care.
Yeah, not even that they care. Yeah, not even that they care. They believe in me.
Believe. Yep.
Right? That's a total, like, you can care for a lot of people. How many people do you believe in?
Ooh,
right?
Yes.
So expectations are a form of belief. And let's be clear, there are bad coaches, right? I've had bad coaches, and that was a huge problem because you assume as a player that this is the most knowledgeable, that there was a high vetting process to this coach. No, there wasn't, right? Half the time it was a recreational buddy that your coach had who can bring them in and get them on board. So and a very important thing about being an athlete is, what do you do when you have a bad coach? When you have a coach that doesn't motivate you in the right way, and when you have a coach that doesn't have the experience you have, right? I went through a couple of years ago, there were only 9 coaches in the NFL out of 32 teams who had actually played offensive line. Could you imagine a quarterback coach not playing quarterback, teaching you what to do, right? So there are bad coaches out there. And as a player, that means you have to do more work. You have to, 1, understand that they're not motivating you. 2, you have to take what they're giving you and somehow sift through their comments to figure out the analysis.
Yes.
And 3, you've got to check your emotions, right? Hey, this coach his problems are not about me. His problems are, he already knows I know more than him in this experience. And so he's going to try and keep me guessing, or he's going to try and keep me feeling a certain way so I don't ask him questions, things like that. So how you overcome a bad coach, that is as important as your performance, because you will encounter a bad coach. What do you do? What can you control?
I really like this, because again, some coaches you just know right away, right? You meet them and you're like, we hit it off. They know me. I know them. I can trust them. I can rely on them. Others, there's a building process of building that relationship. Others, you just know right away. I've had coaches in the past where I'm like, yeah, no way. I just don't trust this person as far as I can throw them, right? Yet at the same time, I'm still going to show up to prepare myself to hopefully do really well in the game or practice, like whatever I'm there to do. But you've got to take other avenues to get to improve yourself. Let me ask you this. Who's one of the best coaches you've had? And how did he, just help develop you? Like what are attributes of great coaches in your mind? We talked a little bit about it, but is there one in mind that you're like, oh, that one I love?
Great coaches teach you technique. They teach you technique. Great coaches don't motivate, because if they give you the great technique, you don't have to be motivated, right? You know what to do. And technique, and one of the things I've been fortunate enough to speak to some of our armed services through my keynote speaking. And one of the things that the SEALs do is, they talk about your willingness to be able to just go through and to compete and to find yourself in a place where you can handle technique. Because at the end of the day, when you're exhausted or when failure happens, you resort to your lowest level of technique. And in the fourth quarter or overtime, we just had a hockey game last night go to, I think, 3 or 4 over. It's crazy, right? Do you have the ability do you have the technique to when you're tired? And so for me, Ray Hitchcock was my high school coach. He literally taught me the technique I used throughout my NFL career. John Latina, my O-line coach at Notre Dame, taught me different angles and really said, okay, this is a 3-step pass. This is a 5-step pass. This is a 7-step. Like that changes how you think. And he was the first coach that really, at a high level in college, found out how to motivate each individual player. And I would call him when I'm in the NFL. I even called him when I had bad coaches in the NFL. And one time he said, yeah, that coach doesn't understand how to motivate you. You're not a guy that thrives off of being screamed at. You need to know what to do. And I was like, how did you know that, coach? Right? Of course. But he gave that time.
Yes.
So great coaches give you techniques. They don't just give you techniques in the sport either. Mike Munchak, one of my favorite coaches, he gave us a technique at the end of the year. He goes, guys, you're going home. And those of you with significant others, stay out of the way. They've been running the ship for the last 6 months. You do not have any say in what's happening at home. Stay out of the way. Find a way to get involved that helps everybody. We'll see you guys in a couple months. It's like, whoa, coach, thank you, right? That's a technique when I'm going back home to be successful. Great coaches talk about technique, and you can hear it immediately, right? Because that's what you need ultimately. As a player, what will make you successful are the techniques you do not know yet. And what will make you successful when you learn them is being able to resort to them when you're exhausted, when you're tired, when you're sore, because nobody cares, and so is your opponent. So great coaches always teach you technique.
Oh, it's so good. So good. And athletes, you have to ask questions if you don't know. Just like Ryan saying, like, you have to ask the question. If you need the technique, ask for help. Don't assume that it's coming your way. Okay, so good. Let's talk pressure for a little bit. You played in some big games, playoffs, Super Bowl, small games like that. I'm just kidding. But you played in some big games, right, throughout your career. I imagine it started in high school, collegiately, of course, and then professionally. How did you handle the pressure, right? I remember you and I had a conversation about walking out of the tunnel for the Super Bowl, or standing in the tunnel right before you guys ran out, in a conversation you had, stuff like that. But that was a pressure situation. So how did you stay mentally in a good place going into those types of games and dealing with that, pressure that's coming from what maybe seems like at all angles sometimes?
Well, pressure to me is a great umbrella term, right? And you'll hear, and I'm a firm believer that you only feel pressure when you have a lower expectation than those around you. So I always expected, I wanted to start in the NFL. I expected we were going to win this game. I expected that we were going to go to the Super Bowl, and I was willing to do the work in between. But what I'm really hearing, and what I hear a lot when I hear pressure, because us athletes, especially people in general, we never have fear. We're talking about fear. Right? We're talking about the fear of a lack of performance or a lack of an outcome. And so for me, in my 5th year in the NFL, I was aware of the fact that fear is a constant, not a variable. So what's your process for fear? How does it manifest itself for you? And for me, it was self-doubt. So I had a phrase that I used and that I teach: I am, I can, I will. And I said the night before Super Bowl, I'm terrified. My greatest achievement is going to be my greatest failure, but I'm also ready. I'm prepared. I can put on my pads. I can knock the crap out of somebody tomorrow. I will be a champion. And that was a part of every single game, right? I am going to have a great game. I'm going to be alert on 3rd down for this blitz. I'm going to be prepared. I can recognize what the defense is doing. I can take a breath in between plays. I can make sure I'm controlling my breathing. If there is a mistake, I can go to my technique and focus on the next play. I will be a contributing member to this win. So number one, you got to have a process for your fear. You have to understand how it manifests itself for you, and understand that it's a great thing, not a good thing, a great thing. Matt, the only time we don't have fear is when we're getting our favorite ice cream, because we know the outcome, right? We know what's going to happen. So for me, realizing that my fear and my self-doubt was going to be heightened when I'm at a place of peak performance. Well, here we go. This is where I want to be. Hi, fear. Come along with us. We're going on a ride, right? And then put in some key processes, right? I had a mental performance coach all 10 years I was in the NFL. I cannot recommend that enough for athletes, to get a mental performance coach. And, I actually had 2 the year we won the Super Bowl, because we had one on staff. And Rick Perea, one of the world champion mental performance coaches, he said, look, I was mad at him. I was not mad at him, but I was mad because I was getting all these ticket requests. Like, I'd be in for pregame and people were like, hey, can I get 4 tickets to the game? It would piss me off. He's like, hey, Ryan, is that a relevant or irrelevant cue to your performance? What do you mean? It's like, well, is somebody texting you? Is that relevant to what you're about to do? Like, hell no. That's why I'm pissed off. He's like, well, is that anger relevant to your performance? No. Okay. So what's relevant to your performance? And focus on that. And when something comes in that's irrelevant, bam, it's irrelevant. You don't have tickets? Not my problem. My ticket day was Wednesday. You get your tickets in Wednesday, or else I'm not getting you tickets, right? So understanding these things as athletes and as performers, whether you're in music or you're in theater, you have to understand what's relevant and irrelevant to your performance. It's irrelevant to have friends that want to party before you have a performance. I was on a team and the guys did not want to be great. They wanted to have fun, right? The way that they let out their fear was to get so hammered Thursday and Friday night that if something happened Sunday, they could then say, oh man, well, I was still kind of hungover from Friday night. That's not where I want to be. right? So I wasn't involved in some of the events, many of the events.
Yes.
I'm not doing that. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is me getting rest. What's relevant is me reviewing my film. What's relevant is me getting some meditation in to visualize my success the next day. So you have to understand fear is a constant, and you have to have a process for it. And most importantly, find some resources around you to get some support in your specific area.
That's something I wish I would have learned earlier, right?
Yeah, me too.
To have that process in place. And, again, what I want everyone to hear, like as coaches, as student athletes, like listen to this right now, is learn earlier than I did, certainly. Ryan, you are well ahead of me, but even learn earlier than Ryan did in your career, right? You start picking this stuff up in high school. I mean, my goodness, like the impact it can make for your ripple effect for your entire life is incredible. And you keep that in mind. And this is why we're hammering this so much. I think it's so critical. What's the biggest difference, Ryan, you see between athletes at the high school, collegiate, and professional level? What does it take?
Skill. It takes a tremendous amount of skill. And in high school, you are typically, if you're an athlete, you have a natural ability over many others, right? Whether it's your school alone, but high school, there's not a Power 5 conference of high school, right? Maybe in Texas they think they are, or Florida, but like typically in high school, you're going against one or two big teams, and then everybody else, you're going to be outmatched. And then, you go to college, and now there's a willingness to that skill. Some guys freak out, guys and gals freak out because, hey, I didn't have to work on my steps. I didn't have to think about this when I played before. And instead of admitting that I need to grow, I'm just going to stay here. I'm good. I'll figure it out. I'll blame it on the coaches or politics, whatever. And then in the NFL, that willingness to work is so greater. Peyton Manning, in between bench press sets, practiced fumbled snaps on the floor of the weight room. Antonio Brown practiced 50 one-handed catches over each shoulder before and after every practice. Peyton Manning and I would be the first two out to the practice field 10 minutes before just to work on little things that we were going to do in that practice. 98% of the locker room and 100% of the young guys were still in the locker room. What are you doing if Peyton Manning is on the practice field earlier, right?
Yes.
So at high school, it's all about skill. And at high school, you've got it. Yep. In college, you have to want it. And in the pros, you have to love it. You have to love the skill. You have to love having a different tool for your tool bag. I used a technique called the up kick. And so anytime I had my guard coming with me, I wasn't going to sit back and wait for someone. I'm going to go hit you right away, knowing that I got inside help. And then I'm going to reestablish my feet, and you're trying to get your life together. Ball's gone, right? Now,
yes.
If you're not, and then another example is like there's watching film, there's studying film, and then there's studying film on how you would beat yourself. And that's similar, right? Everybody watches film in high school. Now you study film in college, but are you studying now the film of how you would beat yourself? Because that's what your opponent's doing, right? So there's levels to every single part of performance. And at the end of the day, it's a tremendous amount of skill you have to have, time management. How do you learn? I used to take notes, review them on Wednesdays, review them on Thursdays, give myself a break on Friday, review it all again on Saturday. Sunday, I'm not thinking, I'm going. So you need skills, a tremendous amount of skills to be successful at each and every level, and a willingness to learn those skills every step you take.
Two follow-up questions. One, how do you practice fumbles in a lock? I'm just curious what that looks like.
It's so awesome. Well, so typically in an NFL or college weight room, right? Football weight room, you get partners of three. So you do an exercise like I'm bench pressing, Matt's spotting me, and Peyton had just went, right? So what he did was he told one of the equipment guys, he's like, hey, we got bench presses in the first part of our workout. Can you come over for 5 minutes while we're at the bench press station and roll me the ball in different ways? Or he'd ask a strength and conditioning staff member to help him. So while he had just finished his pump, right, he gets up and he's saying, hey, roll it whatever way. And he might have had 1 or 2 fumbled snaps the whole year.
Yes.
But he practiced 1,000 times in case it happened. So it didn't throw him off, right? So these are the things, these are the skills and driving down to the minute detail. And in college, one of my favorites, we had a play that we practiced every single week from training camp until the end of the year in the last game when we ran it, which was a 2-point play. It was a direct snap to the running back. We didn't use it all year. And when we used it, we knew the technique. We were skilled in it. We were versed in it. And one of the biggest issues that I see, and you see it in the NFL playoffs, you see it in the NHL and NBA, is when all of us, you can almost see it on the face of a player. They're like, oh, crap, we talked about this 4 months ago, and I didn't pay attention to it. Well, the person across from you did. And that's one of the reasons why Bill Belichick had such a successful run with Tom Brady and the Patriots, is because he made sure people knew the techniques in those moments, right? What to do in those moments, because you can't have a powwow in the middle of the game. Even a timeout's not long enough, and you need practice at that skill. So are you practicing the trouble moments, right? And goalies do this great in hockey, right? They practice deflections, right? That's something that's different. That's something that's going to come up. But the amount of people that are great, it doesn't shock me, the greats, because Peyton Manning would have somebody rolling him a football all kinds of ways for 5 minutes anytime we were doing a bench press. And that's what it takes to be great.
It's amazing. I have this picture in my head of Peyton Manning diving on a ball as it's rolling towards him, but I doubt he actually dove.
Yeah, so sometimes when it went like beyond him, he would just practice scooping it up, right? Because at that point, just get on the ball.
Yes.
At that point, get on the ball. Now, if it's a fumbled snap and you can pick it up, great. And then if it's a fumbled snap to the left, how do you want to pull the ball up? If it's a fumbled snap to the right, where do your feet? So now you're going into, you're training your mind and your body in all these areas that when it happens, you're going to need it, but you've practiced it and practiced it in a way that didn't have that intensity of the game.
And I think you reminded me from a baseball perspective, right? I see, especially high schoolers all the time. I've seen this at college too, where all of a sudden you put somebody in a pressure situation and you have to get a bunt put down, and you send somebody up there and they pop it straight up. And it's because they're not ready at all for what's about to happen, because they've never practiced a 93 mile an hour fastball trying to lay a bunt down the entire year. And
to me, what I hear is, okay, are you running from that moment? Did you miss the sign? Did you practice what it's going to feel like for you when you get that bunt sign? Hey, maybe I want to hit a grand slam. Maybe I wanted to hit, coach wants me to double. How am I going to feel if I want something, but coach tells me something's better for the team? Okay, I'm going to bunt. Okay, this is a fastball pitcher. Where are his fastballs typically? Where are they on the first pitch? Where are they on the second pitch? How does he change his fastball if he sees the bunt? Am I showing the bunt early? Is this a pitcher where it doesn't matter if I show the bunt early or if I'm showing it late? Am I going down the right line? Am I going down the left line? Have I practiced this 100 times?
Yes.
Right? That's what I hear when I hear that.
And the thing I like about everything you're saying, right? I do have one last question for you, or 2 last questions. One, how to find you, but one before that one. Like, I hope what everybody's hearing is, like, as coaches, like, how are you teaching these things, right? To set up these situations the right way. And it takes time, but it can be done in really short periods of time. And athletes, if you're listening to Ryan at all, like, it's just doing the little things consistently, right? It's just anticipating, do work on it, do work again. And you have not once said that you spent 10 hours on a weekend working on this stuff. I know you had some long days and did some stuff, but it sounds like you just made it part of your process, part of what you regularly did, just on an ongoing basis. You
have to, the best way to pick up the blitz is to anticipate it, to know it's coming, right? Yes. On third down, it's coming. What does that mean? Okay. You have to anticipate. And this is, again, where are your goals? If your goal is to be great, you're going to be in this situation. It took me like a good 2 months, my first year in the NFL, to realize that when they're going over blitzes in the meeting room, I'm going to see that in practice. It took me 2 months, right? I got 2 degrees at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, coach is not wasting his time or her time. This is something that that's going to come up. And maybe it's not relevant immediately, and it will be irrelevant. It will be relevant if I'm going to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And the number one way that we deviate from our performance is to not be prepared for that moment and to shrink when the only choice is really to try.
Yes. Last question. We talk about taking notes. You took notes. You just mentioned that. What were you taking notes on? Was it anything and everything? Was it film, everything in between? There's things you need to work on, feelings, mindset. Like, what all was involved in that? And what would you recommend for student athletes interested in like taking notes? Where should they focus first?
Focus first on understanding you need to take notes. The amount of athletes that tell me, oh, school's not my thing. Well, let me tell you what, you're not getting in a huddle with Peyton Manning or Ben Roethlisberger or Alex Smith or Joe Mauch. You're not getting in there with them if you don't know how to study, right? And so what I would do is I would write down, and this is because I got to this because I made like 2 to 3 mistakes a game my rookie year, started feverishly taking notes, and I made 2 to 3 mistakes a year. I would take notes on plays that I already knew. Hey, we're doing install. This is the play. 22 jet scat. Okay, 22 jet scat. This week we're going against the Raiders, and what they're going to do against their defense is you have to be alert for these 3 things. Okay, alert, these 3 things. If this, then this. If that, then this. And then even if I knew the play, 18 force, great, 18 force. I know this play. Oh, but this week, and only from taking notes would I hear, but this week, instead of pushing out to the Sam, this team's going to drop their safety in. So we're going to leave that Sam, and we're going to make sure that combo goes up to the safety who's dropping down, and we're anticipating a cutback. Okay, well, I'm glad I took that note on the play I already knew. And now you go out to practice, you perform it, you get it. Your coaches say yes, because now you showed you were listening. You review it that night, all right? And then you review it again before your performance. And this is not just something limited to football. And one of my good friends is an NBA coach, and he said the majority of teams have players that don't understand how to run plays. Some of the best basketball players, individual players, they'll have great stats, but they don't study. They don't take the information that the coaches work hours on to give them, and they don't use it. And that's why they never win. So you can only win on purpose. And part of that purpose is taking purposeful notes to make sure that in your language, in your mind, you understand everything that's going on and could happen so that you have your process to handle it all.
Listen up, everybody. He's dropping just gold in your lap right here, and it's in the form of a notebook and a pen, amongst many other things. Ryan, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you, my friend? Where can they find the great Django Gatsby, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
You got to say that.
He'll find you. Django Gatsby will find you, and it'll be somewhere fun. Yeah, check me out on Instagram at Ryan Harris _68. Twitter, same thing, at Ryan Harris _68. My email is Ryan at RyanHarris68. So shoot me an email if I can ever be assistance. And just like Matt, I love helping people who are working towards their goals and dreams. And if I can ever be of assistance, let me know. And check out my website, RyanHarris68.com, and my podcast, Gridiron and Growth, found wherever you can find your podcast. Beautiful.
Ryan, I can't thank you enough, my man, for spending the last 60 minutes with me and just sharing your wisdom. And I just appreciate you as a friend, as a businessman, as an athlete, as just a human being. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, brother. Love you a lot, and I love your impact even more. Keep winning, brother. See you soon.